As you know, I set up the phone camera each Mass, and there are people, about 50 people in the area who follow the daily Masses. In fact, Madeline's one of those, but she's here today, so isn't that nice? And once a week, there's also a class, fourth graders from St. Francis Borgia Catholic School in Chicago, Illinois, who watched because their teacher, Mrs. Borowski, is from this parish, so they're watching as well today. Today is the feast day of, we say, St. Pius of Pietrelcina, a little town in Italy, but he's better known as Padre Pio. As I was growing up in the 60s, it was amazing to think that we had this great saint living in our midst. Everybody pretty much thought he was a saint by that time, because he had a very unique phenomenon happen to him as a young Franciscan friar. He's a member of the Franciscan order who became a priest. But early on in his life as a Franciscan, he received the stigmata, the wounds of Christ. Actually had his hands would bleed, and they'd be very painful too. It's a reminder. This happens occasionally in our history as a church and among very holy people. St. Francis of Assisi himself had the stigmata, like Padre Pio, and it's a reminder of the wounds of Christ. It drew people to him to remember what Christ has done for us, but also a sign of holiness, and he became very well known for his spiritual counsel, his role as a confessor, sometimes spending up to 10 hours straight just sitting in the confessional, hearing sin after sin after sin, and offering the mercy of God to people. You know, that's what the wounds of Christ are about. Through his cross, he offered to us our salvation and the forgiveness of sins. So Padre Pio, which is literally Father Pius in English, he offered that gift of mercy and teaching of the truth of the gospel, and then had that stigmata for 50 years until the day he died in 1968, and then miraculously his hands were restored completely. Very, very unique, but again a reminder to us of God's presence in our midst and his love for us, which is constant. And so, your word, O Lord, is a lamp for my feet. We just said that 8 times. Your word, O Lord, is a lamp for my feet, from Psalm 119. It reminds me, of course, of a very practical thing in our lives, a flashlight, which allows you to kind of see your way around in the dark. And so when you're walking in the dark, either in the forest or in a neighborhood, yeah, you might want to look and see where you're going, but most of the time you better look at the ground, because you could see where you're going and not pay attention. Then you step into a pothole, or you trip over a rock, and then where are you? Not so good. So you want the flashlight to, sometimes look down the road, but then mostly look here and see what the path is before you. That's the lamp that the Word of God provides for us as we go through life, is so that we can see our way and not trip over the things like temptations that come our way, or false teaching, or things that can distract us, but to keep our focus on God and moving toward God. You know, look down the long road occasionally, but also make sure we're taking good steps. So when we think about the Word of God, it just means we should be meditating on it. We should be reading the Scriptures and letting it sink into our heart. We have some great examples today. From the book of Proverbs, we have, what is the book of Proverbs? It's really a collection of proverbs, sayings, wise sayings. Sometimes they're only 2 lines long, and like today's maybe a little bit longer. But just this is a great example of the wisdom that's here and how it helps guide us in life. So here the author of the book of Proverbs, we don't know for sure who that was, but there's truth and wisdom here. It's in the Scriptures. He says, 2 things I ask of you, deny them not from me before I die. So he's saying this is important. No matter what happens before I die, I need this. One thing, Put falsehood and lying far from me. And actually, there are a number of proverbs that talk about the dangers of deceit or lying, to always tell the truth. So they're all through the book of Proverbs. There are a few of those. So that's one of the two things. I don't want any deceit or lying in my life. So it reminds us, I want to be an honest person. And I need to be around honest people. And I need to challenge people on honesty, because deceit, lying, that's not going to get you anywhere. So that's one thing. The second thing is, give me neither poverty nor riches. I don't want either poverty or riches. And it elaborates. Provide me only with the food that I need, lest if I'm too full, I deny you, saying, who is the Lord? That's an interesting comment. Because if we have too much, then we think, I got everything I need. I don't even need God anymore. And that's the problem. That's why Jesus said one time, blessed are the poor in spirit. One real advantage of poverty, not that it's a good thing to be poor, but one advantage is you recognize your need for God. Because if you don't have everything, you're constantly praying, God, help me through this difficult time. And so if we're too full, we start to think, I'm doing this all by myself. I'm fine. I don't need God. Now, really, we always need God, even if we have everything we need. In fact, he helps us to know how to use the things that we have. But so that's one thing. I don't want to be too wealthy to have everything I need, lest I say, who is the Lord, and forget about God. And I don't want to be too much in want, too impoverished, because then you're tempted. It says, I don't want to be in want, or lest I be in want and I steal and profane the name of God. Sometimes people are so desperate they don't even know if they're going to be able to eat today or tomorrow. And then in that desperation, they might take something that's not theirs and steal. So we don't want to be so full or so poor, but recognize in the middle is where we know we have God in our life, and we're not too desperate to make poor decisions. Isn't that something? All of that is right there in that little line. Two things I ask before I die: put falsehood and lying far from me, and give me neither poverty nor riches. Provide me only with the food I need, lest being full I deny you, saying, who is the Lord? Or being in want I steal and profane the name of God. And then Jesus also makes a similar point, actually, when he tells the disciples to go out and preach the gospel. He says, you don't need anything. You don't need a walking stick. You don't need a sack or food nor money. I will provide for you. God will provide for you all along the way. All you need to do is proclaim the good news. Now, that's an important thing for us to learn too, is all we need is God in our lives to guide us. The things in this life, they only have value in that they help direct us toward God, or you help us in serving God and doing God's good work. So even when it comes to the things like the technology that allows us to be connected all over the world. In fact, I think one of the blessings that comes from this pandemic, as horrible as it is it has taught us new ways to communicate and ways to connect with each other. Yeah, it's not the same as being in person, but imagine if we'd have been in 1917, the last time we had this massive global pandemic that was so devastating. They didn't have any of these means of communication. And now it's easy for people in Chicago to watch the Mass. Isn't that amazing? So, but it reminds us, regardless of all that, because we can get caught up and stressed out by the technology, still it's about Jesus. The only value of the technology is to help us to communicate the love of Christ. So here's a homework assignment I'll give you, since I would be giving it to the students of St. Francis Borgia Catholic School. It's good for all of us. Look at the book of Proverbs. Look at the book of Proverbs, and here's the thing. It's just a collection of sayings. You can just skim through them, Some are, I have no idea what that's about. But some of them are going to be really obvious. And here's a nice assignment. Mrs. Borowski might want to consider this for her students. Just pick a proverb that you need for today. Just go through there. They're just little 2-line proverbs. You can whip through them, and you'll find a few, and then pick, what is the proverb here in this great book of Proverbs that I need for me now, that will be a little lamp to guide my feet. Your word is a lamp for my feet. Remember, we just said that over and over in the psalm. So what is that proverb that will be a lamp for your feet and guide you in your life today. Because the Word is always going to direct us toward God and on the way of righteousness and truth.